Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
People, when in doubt, just go without. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. I was raped. No, we had sex.
Number 1.
Commenter. I know a guy who is now a sex offender for buying drinks for a girl in a bar, taking her home, and having sex with her. He was divorced at the time. She turned out to be underage, and her parents got him for statutory. He swears that she was the best jailbait he's ever seen. Guy can only see his kids with a cop present now. It's utter bullshit. Person B. He found a girl in a bar where you can only enter if you're 21 and up. Girl obviously lied about her age and he still got in major trouble. I find it hard to believe this would happen if the genders were reversed.
Number 2.
In college, I had a drunk girl, I was sober, climb into my bed, while I was sleeping, naked and try to force me to penetrate her. Naturally, I had a hard-on because, well, it's a naked woman, and she took that as evidence that I wanted to have sex with her. At the time, I was trying to start a relationship with her sorority sister, and had to decline physically and verbally several times before I finally escorted her out my door and locked it. I told my roommate to not let her in anymore. She eventually called me up and apologized, but she ended up telling a couple sorority sisters a watered-down version that made me sound sort of feminine. Apparently, I got a few jeers from them, but I didn't give too many FS because I had a nice fling with a much better girl. Maybe not horribly relevant to the issue at hand, but female-to-male rape can happen.
Number 3.
Commenter. I've actually studied some of the criminal procedures for rape cases. I'm not an expert, but in some jurisdictions words alone are not enough to accuse someone of rape, unwanted sexual penetration. In these jurisdictions, there has to be actual, physical resistance, more than just saying no, but actually pushing back to the point of resistance. In other jurisdictions, words alone are sufficient. What this suggests, what rape should be defined as, is still not 100% legally defined. The jurisdiction you're in determines your legal recourse. It is situations like this that make rape cases so difficult to determine. Person B. Which is why rape cases aren't black and white. I work in the legal field, and I read hundreds of criminal court cases each week. At least where I live, Canada, it seems fair. I've read cases where a 13-year-old lied about her age, had sex with a 20-year-old, and claimed rape. The court ascertained that the guy did everything in his power to determine her age and she lied, so it wasn't statutory rape. I had a case where the victim claimed rape after a night of drinking and the guy was acquitted because, essentially, there was more to it than I can list here. They had fooled around, not exactly sex, but close to it, on other occasions and on that same evening. They had both been drinking and she didn't remember saying no. In that circumstance it was determined that as was probable she wanted to have sex but simply didn't remember because she was plastered. There was reasonable doubt that the guy took advantage of her. Other circumstances of drunken sex have been determined to be rape. It really depends on looking at everyone's side of the story and choosing what is logical. The case in question must have been a doozy. We're not given enough evidence in this little blurb to determine anything. Was she visually upset? Did they use protection? Did she immediately call the police? The courts look at every little detail to determine the outcome of the case, something we don't have in this instance. Person C. I worked for a public defender's office in the US for a few summers in high school, and even though we had a DA that campaigned on filing charges on all sex crimes, pretty much every date rape case that didn't end in a plea deal charges were either dropped or the defendant was found not guilty because it's ridiculously hard to beyond a reasonable doubt. Statutory rape on the other hand was very bad because it was provable and the DA was very good at putting away 19-year-olds with 16-year-old girlfriends. Person D. Putting away an 18-year-old with a 16-year-old girlfriend is wrong. Especially when they get put on a sex offenders list for life. Person E. I agree, when I was 16 I dated a couple of 18-year-olds, and had sex with them willingly. I think it's wrong that those boys could have been put away for doing something that I was fully compliant in. I think that's the sticking point with me though, they were boys, they're not grown yet either. In all likelihood, I would have been the one taking advantage of them.
Number 4.
Commenter. The girl messages the guy she's been on a couple dates with to come over. He brings some beers. They play video games, order a pizza. They're making out, wrestling, and end up on the bed. She says stop and he stops immediately and sits on the edge of the bed, and then she tickles him. They're tickling each other, she says stop again, and again, he stops and backs off. This happens a few times. So, they've just started and she lets out a weak little stop, but she said it like 5 times just playing right. So he doesn't stop and she doesn't say it again. And then she told her friend that he raped her. To me, I'm thinking, she's established stop as being meaningless. If she wanted him to stop, saying no, really, get off me would be a logical follow-up, not just using the same word you've used 5 times while playing around and only once and dropping it. Person B. On first reading the anecdote I was inclined to side with you because the way it was worded made it sound like the final weak stop was with regards to tickling, which eventually escalated to sex. However, rereading the story it seems like they start having sex and the woman says stop. Whatever stop meant with regards to tickling is not what stop means with regards to sex. It's not possible to conflate the implied consent of tickling with the implied consent to sex. It just doesn't work that way. Person C. Everything in context. According to this story, all the stops were clearly communicated in the context of tickling/wrestling, which, yes, can lead to some pretty great sex. But, in every situation where I have had sex post-tickling, it's rough sex, meaning the girl is into it too. Even if she doesn't state it verbally, she definitely communicates it in her actions. A weak whisper, stop with no physical consent should be a huge red flag if you're having sex with a girl, or boy. Honestly, if I was about to have sex with a girl even if she didn't say stop, but just froze up physically, I'd be worried what the FK is wrong. Because in that case something is wrong, even if she wants to have sex. Person D. A lot of people are complaining that the girl in this scenario is making the word stop useless, which is arguable, but the fact is that she stopped him making sexual advances multiple times. Does that not construe in any way that she has a boundary she does not want to cross with him? I don't think that she handled this situation very well, but that does not give him an excuse to continue after being told to stop. He may not have thought of it as rape. I think he should educate himself about it and be more observant and wary in these situations, but she obviously did. It is a very traumatic, stressful, and demeaning thing to go through, the absolute opposite of what a sexual experience is supposed to be. Something that I was taught and that I will use if I ever encounter a man who doesn't think I'm being serious when I tell him to stop is to strongly say, if you don't stop now then I will consider this rape, which should get the point across. But not all women are courageous enough to say this directly, and nor should they have to be to stop unwanted advances. The word stop should always be more than efficient. Person E. Unfortunately, you don't get to decide how meaningless or meaningful a word someone else said is. Stop still means stop. It doesn't mean disregard what I'm saying just because you want something now and can explain it away later. Why did he stop all those other times and then suddenly decide he doesn't have to listen anymore? I certainly don't think that it makes him a predatory sort of rapist who is pure evil or anything like that, but there was a lapse of judgment, a crossing of boundaries, and perhaps lack of proper communication. This happens in other situations/aspects of relationships as well, but it is especially toxic regarding sex/rape. That is why you need to be extra cautious and actually listen when someone says stop, even if they are just joking. What's worse, stopping and not getting what you want, or ignoring someone's wishes and raping them?
Number 5.
Take no and stop at face value, guys. It could possibly prevent a lot of headaches. Seriously, if a woman is playing the game with you, get up and walk out. The possible legal and social ramifications are just not worth it. People, when in doubt, just go without.
Number 6.
I started thinking about how women react during sex. Now, I'm a woman, and I've never had sex with another woman, so I don't know how other women are. But from personal experience, I have never engaged in sexual activity where it might be ambiguous that I was into it. Meaning, I'm very much involved and my eagerness and enjoyment is pretty clear. Regarding cases such as this, where the suggestion is that the woman may not have made it clear that she was actually saying no, or stop, from a man's perspective, is it normal for women to be uninvolved during sex? Do any of the men in these situations ever wonder, why isn't she into this at all? I'm not saying that lying still is always a communicator for rape, but if I was a man and in a situation where I thought a woman wanted to have sex, and yet when I got there, it suddenly occurred to me that she wasn't giggling, moaning, pressing her hips into me, kissing me, etc., I'd start to question whether she was actually into it. I'm not sure I'd be into it myself anymore, even if she hadn't said no or stop. The lack of clear indication of enjoyment would make it feel one-sided, and therefore, not pleasurable. But, again, I'm not a man.
Number 7.
Commenter. This sounds like a very one-sided account of what actually happened that aims to justify his behavior. Even if it happened exactly as described, he should have stopped. I'm not sure I'd describe it as rape, but it was certainly bad behavior. It's his responsibility to check what is meant by stop, not assume she was joking/playing around. I can imagine her description sounding more like she was happy to flirt/have a tickle fight on the bed but didn't want to have sex. He kept pushing the tickling further than she was comfortable with. She said stop and just wanted to go back to playing around. He kept pushing it further and eventually got his way by just ignoring her telling him to stop. If you're with a new partner you don't know very well, you shouldn't assume you can interpret what they really mean. If she says stop, just stop and ask what the deal is. If you feel like she's being confusing or leading you on, just leave. Don't have sex and justify it later. The girl shouldn't have to be forceful in turning you down. And not every girl reacts in a predictable way when she feels she has sex forced on her. Person B. Without knowing exactly what happened, it's tough to judge, but most likely you're right, she was setting boundaries. Her boundary was light making out and tickling. He probably wanted to go further, and she repeatedly let him get to a point she was comfortable with and stopped it. Pretty sure two things happened here. Number 1, she should have ended the night or clearly said this is how far we're going tonight when he repeatedly wanted to go further than she was comfortable with. 2, if a girl/guy says stop, you stop. If it's tickling etc., that's one thing, but if you're rounding third base going for home and you hear it, it's done. Over. Stop.
Number 8.
As a girl who has been sexually assaulted in a situation just like this, you go through a ton of mixed emotions. You stay stopped so many times that they become worthless. At some point you just give in and that's it. You do it because you're scared and you do it because there is nothing else that you can do. You can't say that she could have done more or she should have done this because you haven't been in the situation. It was probably the first time she felt that she wasn't in control. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.